Hello there. I just wanted to continue looking through part 7 in the series from Private Eye, written by Dr. Philip Hammond. And this is my part 3 of looking at it, at this part 7. Hope that's clear. Kind of analysis of it and trying to consolidate other information that's come up prior and since. And before I start going back into that, I just wanted to mention that next week in the Thirlwall inquiry is going to be a very interesting week, because the particular highlights, as other people have drawn out, here will be Tuesday the 12th, so that's next Tuesday, in which we're hearing from Dr. Jane Horden, consultant neonatologist at the Royal Free London Hospital. And on the same day, Dr. Joe McPartland, Dr. Joe McPartland, who's a pathologist at the Alder Hey Hospital. More about them in a minute. And on the very next day, Wednesday the 13th of November, Dr. Ravi Jayaram, clinical lead in children's services. So that's going to be a very interesting day to see what comes out there from his testimony and what questions he's asked, and will he be allowed just to do his usual thing, or will they hold his feet to the fire to any extent whatsoever? Well, we'll see next Wednesday. I'm just going to refer to a tweet here written by a very good Twitter account called The Trials of Lucy Letby. I'll make a note of it below. The address is at Lucy Letby Trials. I'll make a note of it in the description bar for you. But just to read through this tweet, because it sums it up very succinctly. And it says, in relation to the witnesses for next week at Thirlwall inquiry, here are the witnesses scheduled to give evidence next week. The highlights: Dr. Ravi Jayaram, consultant paediatrician and one of Lucy Letby's main accusers, alongside Dr. Stephen Breary, who gives evidence the following week. So that'll be something very interesting to look at as well. Jayaram testified at the trial that he walked in on Lucy Letby trying to kill baby Kay, but failed to alert anybody about it for several months at the very least. I think it's over a year. I believe it's 13 months. And then we go into the two other names that I mentioned earlier. Dr. Jane Horden. I'm reading from the tweet from Lucy Letby Trials. Dr. Jane Horden, consultant neonatologist and author of an external review, she was asked to do this review, you see, into the baby deaths of the Countess. Horden found, quote, major or significant suboptimal clinical care in 14 of the 17 deaths and collapses she was asked to investigate, according to the senior manager's opening statement. And then Dr. Joe McPartland, who's going to be speaking next Tuesday as well, or giving evidence, shall we say. She's a consultant paediatric, stumbling over my words, I must slow down. Consultant paediatric pathologist and author of a subsequent forensic review of 4 baby deaths, as per Jane Horden's report. So Dr. Jane Horden didn't have time to complete the further in-depth review of these 4 cases that she said it would be a very good idea for these further 4 cases to be looked into in more depth, and this was Dr. Joe McPartland's job, who's a paediatric pathologist. So they had hitherto remained unexplained, and that's why Dr. Joe McPartland got involved at the request of Dr. Jane Horden and indeed the Countess of Chester Hospital. Those four babies were the deaths of the babies with the letters A, I, O, and P. Dr. Joe McPartland also conducted baby D's post-mortem examination, which determined the cause of death to be pneumonia with acute lung injury. In relation to baby D, and I'm sorry I can't remember which Twitter account put this very... I'm going to put it on the screen. If I think I've finally worked out how to do it with the video, trying to layer over a picture over me speaking now. Hopefully I'll be able to do that. You'll be able to read this yourself if you pause the screen. I'll just read a bit from this, perhaps I'll read it all. So this is from the trial of last year, 2023 trial, in relation to baby D and Dr. Joe McPartland's involvement in doing a post-mortem, and it's with regard to an agreed fact. So that's an agreed fact between the prosecution and defence. And it's called Agreed Fact number 22. So this is an excerpt from the first trial, effectively, in relation to baby D. So the date of birth of baby D, 20th of June 2015. Point number one, Dr. Joe McPartland, consultant paediatric pathologist, conducted a post-mortem examination of baby D at the Royal Liverpool Children's Hospital, Alderhay, at 11:15 hours on the 23rd of June 2015. Number two, Dr. McPartland made written reports of the examination dated the 3rd of August 2017 and 13th of May 2019, which included the following findings of fact. A. In her report of the 3rd of August 2017, Dr. McPartland observed that, quote, lungs, in relation to the baby D's lungs, there is patchy acute pneumonia, most prominent within one of the right lung samples, with some hyaline membranes present. I don't understand these technical terms, but it's obvious that I do understand acute pneumonia though. So, with the right lung samples with some hyaline membranes present, indicating diffuse alveolar damage, so damage to the lungs. Although pneumonia can develop secondary to ventilation, the period of intubation and ventilation was short in this case, i.e. the case of baby D, taking into account the clinical scenario with spontaneous rupture of membranes 36 hours before birth. Elsewhere we've heard from the mother herself that actually that was a period, there was a period of 50 hours. There was a period of 50 hours rather than 36, so that period of time seems to be in dispute. And to go back to this agreed fact here now, or set of agreed facts, as to that 36 hours before birth, you'll read in due course, Dr. McPartland qualifies that later, but just reading as per her first report, I think I understand that. Anyway, it goes on to colon, so it goes on to say, this is what she's saying, I think it is likely that pneumonia was already present at birth. That's what she's saying in relation to baby D. She goes on to say, it is most unfortunate that the placenta was disposed of after delivery, as examination may have revealed an ascending genital tract infection as the cause of congenital pneumonia, and would have allowed me, i.e. Dr. McPartland, to be more definitive about the timing of onset of the pneumonia. She goes on to say, although baby D's CRP was low, in early onset sepsis, the sensitivity of CRP in detecting infection may be as low as 22% and therefore does not rule out infection. So she's obviously saying there that there could well have been infection here, that just that testing, that CRP testing, has got low sensitivity, so it's as low as 20%. 22%, so it may well not have picked that up. So you can't go by, as I'm sure Evans would do, can't just say, oh well, look at the CRP there, and if it's not showing infection, if that sign is not a signifier of infection, then it's obviously there is no infection, because you're saying here there's only a 22% chance, or its sensitivity is potentially as low as 22% in picking up the infection. She goes on to say here, Dr. McPartland, Microbiology tests were negative in this case, but this is often the case after antibiotic treatment and does not rule out infection, which is histologically proven in this case. So it's proven, there's no doubt, there is histologically proven infection in the case of baby D. The final little paragraph here, which I hope you can read on the screen here if I've done the video correctly. Virology tests were negative for viral infections. Toxicology revealed a very low concentration of morphine consistent with that routinely used in neonatal care during intubation and ventilation. So hopefully that picture's it'll come off the screen now if I've worked out how to do it, and I'll go to the private eye article. And we're up to the section now. This is part 7 in the ongoing series. I'll do a couple of the little sections here and then stop the video for this time. So the next section with a picture of Dewey Evans there. It says, the title of it is The Air in the Stomach Argument. Air forced down the nasogastric tube was initially alleged to be the cause of death of babies C, I, and P. How it killed baby C was explained by lead prosecution expert Dr. Dewey Evans in court in November 2022. Quote, if you get a load of pressure in your abdomen, that diaphragm can't move and you get the so-called splintage, and you will soon suffocate. You won't be able to breathe and you can collapse pretty quickly. So therefore, his, i.e. baby C's, collapse is consistent with a volume of air injected into his stomach. It splints the diaphragm, stops breathing. He's less than 800 grams, so that's what happens. But here, it goes on to say, in August 2024, Evans withdrew his evidence on murder by splinting, because he had to. And there's a note here to say to see part 6, see the last private eye, which is part 6. So Evans withdrew that evidence in August 24, just a few months ago, in a signed statement to Channel 5, and he declared, Evans did, none of the babies were killed as a direct result of the injection of air or fluid and air deliberately injected into their stomachs. How extraordinary is that? After the trial's all finished, you can just change the method of murder. Just change it and everyone's going to go, well, he can do that, can't he? Well, it seems he's a law unto himself, so he seems to be able to, and the criminal justice system won't do anything about it, thus far anyway. So he's changed that. And Dr. Philip Hammond goes on to say, this matters because the theory of death by splinting played a big role in the trial. Indeed it did. With 159 references of splint and splinting and detailed descriptions of how it kills with support from other experts. So not only did Evans give all that evidence about that being the method of murder, this pushing of air down the nasogastric tube. Obviously it doesn't work for him anymore. He's got to change the method after all the convictions have been brought in, It's unbelievable, isn't it? 159 references, and some of the other experts there joined in with that alleged evidence, but now it's all been thrown out. And he's acknowledged that it's not possible. So he can just change his mind as to the method. But that's what the jury heard, that was the method, and that it was on that basis that those juries convicted in those particular cases here. So there's 159 references of splint and splinting and detailed description of how it kills with support from other experts. Evans has now disowned it, leaving a great hole in the prosecution case. Doesn't seem to trouble, as yet anyway, the Court of Appeal. But at least we don't have to argue about splinting anymore. Dr. Hammond says. The next section here, I think I'll just do this section and then I'll end this video, is titled The Statistical Argument. The absence of statistical analysis to inform the trial has greatly angered the Royal Statistical Society. However, it seems it was not the fault of Cheshire Police. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Anyway, see what it goes on to say. The Guardian recently revealed that the force signed a consultancy agreement and agreed fees with Jane Hutton, a professor of statistics at the University of Warwick, to do a statistical analysis. Hutton sent them a lengthy email saying her expert report would need to analyse all the deaths at Chester, full staff rotas and deaths at other units. See, that's been done since by some brilliant work done by Dr. Scott McLachlan and Professor Fenton about that, comparing it to other units over a similar period of time. And there were there were equivalent or even slightly greater, quote unquote, spikes of deaths in other units, in other hospitals. She being Professor Hutton, then received an email stating, quote, "We have had a further meeting this afternoon where we have informed the prosecutors that we're looking at the validity of statistical evidence again in this case. The prosecutor does not agree with our line of inquiry and has instructed us not to pursue this avenue any further at present." So on the surface, that looks as though the police wanted to do the quote-unquote right thing. I don't understand the interaction between CPS and the police in terms of, have they got that power to stop that line of investigation? In other words, is it incumbent upon the police to say, well, we're going to do it anyway because we don't feel we need this evidence? Or as soon as the CPS are involved, are they then to be calling all the shots about investigatory avenues? That's something I don't know. I don't know what it is in practice, and I don't know what it should be in practice, and how far this devolves from that practice or moves away from that practice, the legitimate practice. In other words, I'm trying to get to the point that, was it convenient for the police as well? In other words, they say, well, okay, if you think that, yeah, we're on board with that. If you're telling us it's going to harm our case, of course we're not. We're going to drop it like a hot potato. So in other words, it was a meeting of minds of the CPS and the police. But here there's been a sense that it's being projected as though, they were being stopped doing the right thing. But perhaps it was more a meeting of minds. I'm not 100% about that, but I suspect it could well have been. The last little bit here in this section. Is the prosecutor allowed to direct the police in that way? Well, that's literally what I've just asked. Was the defence shown the entire email chain? That's very important. I don't know if they call it discovery. I know they call it that in America. But was that part of discovery or the equivalent term over here for the defence? If it wasn't, that should be yet another, they're stacking up, yet another reason for, well, I don't think there should be a retrial. It should be simple quashing of the verdicts. But just yet another reason in the myriad reasons that these convictions are utterly unsafe. Was the defence shown the entire email chain? I doubt it very much. It turned out to be a very sound move by the Crown Prosecution Service, as Professor Hutton has since... what does this mean? It turned out to be a very sound move by the Crown Prosecution Service, as Professor Hutton has since turned into a very vocal critic of the way statistics were used in the trial. Her report would have been very unhelpful for the prosecution. Oh, I see. Yes, I see what you mean. I see what he means. Sometimes I jump the gun a bit, and yeah, I see exactly what he means. But it's quite possible, is it not, that had that work been done by Professor Hutton, as well as many other things, there may never have been charges, as there should never have been any charges at all. So it would have never got to the position of creating this bundle of whatever the police do, of a case to send to the CPS in the first place. But anyway, that's what they did, that's what the CPS did. Are they going to be held accountable for that? Very important question. Was the defence shown the entire email chain? And is the prosecutor allowed to direct the police in that way? Yeah, they're very, very salient and powerful questions that need to be answered. I've got a feeling the Thirlwall inquiry isn't going to answer them, or even want to answer them. I'm going to leave it there so that the video isn't too long, and I'm going to pick up with the next bit next time. Have a good Saturday evening, or might be afternoon or morning, depending where you are in the world. Take care, and all the best. Bye-bye.